Braden and Kostya would like to do some kind of epic month in review, like where they look at all of the graduates from a given month. So maybe that will happen. But over at the dojo, we got a lot of ideas. We don't always have the follow through on said ideas. Okay, a couple announcements. To start, we had this promo where people could join the dojo for a month to kind of check it out. Went amazing. We got like 150 people, something like that. So that's really cool. Dojo is definitely growing. So that means we're up to 1,250 some people. Beautiful. And there's all kinds of things the way the dojo can grow. I think right away, for example, this video that we have, that, David did the rap, Charlie Silva did the audio, Braden did the video. Fantastic, right? Things like that, just small incremental improvements for the dojo. We're going to have to build a better website. But I think at a lot of it, it's like there's some, let's call it cultural questions. So then the big one I want to address today is something that looking into the database helps me understand as a reflection of the dojo is just like, well, how many people are doing it? Now, the great news is that the people who are doing it very well, right? They're doing great annotations, and I'm really happy about it. However, it's just if you've been to more of these graduation shows, you know that not everybody's doing it. And in this case, we only have 1 out of 3 doing it. Bummer for everybody involved. And I think, what I see a lot of people doing in the dojo, right, is they enter it and they're there for the community, great. But they're kind of well, I'll pick and choose from what's going on in the program, and then I'll, kind of figure it out on my own. And obviously I can't prevent people from doing that. But what I want to say about it is, what happens then is you don't end up doing the hard work, right? Because going over your games is the hardest thing to do, and you're just not going to do it. It's much easier to just sit down and do Puzzle Rush, right? And when you look at actually we'll do that today, we'll look at the scoreboard, and you can see that the Puzzle Rush thing, basically everyone's done. And we set that bar kind of purposely low. It's not too hard to hit the Puzzle Rush requirements. And we want people to move on from the Puzzle Rush once they've hit the baseline requirements for their cohort. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's just a thing I'm going to stress throughout this, that the annotations are fantastic of the people who are doing them, but we have a large group of people who are progressing because they're doing chess, but they're not. I think you're going to hit a plateau, these same people, if they don't annotate their games. That's my sense as a coach. Okay, let's get into it. So let's first look at the scoreboard here. It'd be nice if I could find it. There it is. And we'll go pop, and we'll go pop, and we'll go pop, and we'll go pop. And the first person we're going to look up here is Kirk D. And we're just going to see his progress here. I'm going to stock him here on the scoreboard. Oh, by the way, one cool thing that we've got in the works, and this will probably happen if we do this, it will happen when we rebuild the website, I'm guessing, just because it would be kind of hard. You look at our beautiful scoreboard here, and one thing that's a little bit confusing is that you see that there's all these different metrics. Lee Chess, oh my God, 1700 is, going to be 1750 is going to be 1300 FIDE. So one thing I was thinking it would be cool right at the beginning here to have a progress bar which shows just your completion. What degree of completion are you to reaching, let's say in this case, 1750 Lee Chess, right? And then another one would be what degree of completion are you for the program requirements. So those could be side by side next to each other. It's just hard for me, and I'm sure other people, you see all these disparate ratings, And then you have to think like, okay, how far off are they from making it, and so on. Okay, so first thing we got to do actually is we got to go back in time, because Kirk D just showed up here, and I don't think he's put in anything yet, which makes sense. He just got here. Actually, he put in his Puzzle Rush stuff. As is typical actually, right? They've already passed that level. Perhaps he hasn't passed it for the 5 minute. He's already hit it for the Puzzle Storm. Okay, so let's go back. Well, the thing I always like to do is look how somebody made it. So we're going to go back in time. And okay, wait, that's a little confusing. Wait, let's see that again. Because he went up to 1200, 1300. Oh. So it should be showing him, for example, it's not showing him as a graduate. So there I'm confused. So now we can't see. If DM Hoki's watching this, DM Hoki, what's going on, boss? Where's Kirk D, man? Where's he in the graduates? All right, so that's just going to be a little note to self. I'll try to figure that out. Kirk D has been here for a while, though, so I don't understand where he went to, or if he got excommunicated somehow from the scoreboard. Where did Kirk D graduate from? That's my question for DM Hoki, or anybody else out there who knows. All right. Okay, so let's do this, Jesse. Let's go back, pop. We're going to look at a game, and then we're going to go look at some of this other stuff here, some of the other people. So it's only of these three, only Kirk D did a game, and he's got more than one. So for that reason, we're going to do two of Kirk's here. Kirk is playing black. And that rating, 1739, is a Lee chess rating. Okay, very fancy, A6, the so-called Chebanenko. So it's fine. I, of course, have an attitude about it because it's not a developing move, but it's fundamentally okay. White plays C5 for space. And then we're going to get this interesting position. Now, I'm presuming that all of this is known to Kirk because he's not saying anything about it here. 95 we should criticize. We know why he did it. He's trying to scratch at the B6 square, but it's not a developing move. And knight takes E5, which Kirk discusses, has the problem of what are you going to do about knight B6? It seems annoying, right? Knight E5, knight B6 seems annoying. That isn't in the notes. So you ask yourself, well, what would Kraai want to do in this position? He'd probably want to play bishop E7, right? Yeah. It's still a very spicy position for sure. Okay. H6. I don't think it's wrong, and then I think just note to Kirk if he watches this that knight E5, knight B6 is the intermezzo question. Okay, white plays E3, bishop E7, F3. Okay. Let's say some obvious things. White with C5 is playing for space. And one of the problems with knight E5 is that he is going to be trading off pieces. And black in general is happy to trade some stuff off because he's got less space, but he's got more time. And the knight on A4 is, of course, just one threat. That's all it is. It's got one idea, boss. And F3 has the play for space, right? But it was very difficult for white to play this position, I think, because it's not entirely clear where his pieces want to go, you know? I think about it from white's perspective. Okay. Now you talk about both bishop h7 and castles. I think that's all fair. Personally, I would have really been interested in castles because I don't know what white's going to do, you know? I really don't know what he's going to do, and I do know that I want the castle. That's the thing that I am certain that I want. But there's nothing wrong with bishop d8, so let's give it a look. g4, controversial. h4, we're going to call it controversial. Maybe not wrong, just a little frisky, right? Now, what white has to realize is maybe he's getting hosed with the fact that the knight on a4 kind of owes us a tempo. It's not kind of, it owes us a tempo. And the king on e1 is arguably problematic. Now, black plays very simple moves here, which is fine. Knight e5 followed by bishop c7. I would have been interested in the annotations about bishop a5 check and castles. I am not convinced that g5 is such a thing because white's not ready. And there's many reasons to believe that white isn't ready yet. And I would like to play pop and pop, you know, but I can't do it yet because the g7 pawn is hanging. So castles first is really frisky, where I'm just going to say, well, maybe I'm not afraid. Oh, what happened there? Chess.com lost its mind. Kraai, go back, please. And Chess.com, take it easy. And castles. So if g5, knight h5 is interesting. You read some of these comments. I oftentimes don't read them, and then people lose their minds on me. Okay. Cool. Actually, Rook Repair, I'm just going to read what he said. Biggest thing was I had never read a chess book. Almost done with How to Beat Your Dad at Chess and actually really enjoyed it. And doing mate in twos from a book has helped my visualization. Fantastic. Well, some people, that was a complaint the other day about How to Beat Your Dad in Chess. I was like, you can't complain about that book. It's impossible. In any case, the reason to believe in this position for black is that our bishop on h7, our claim is that it's a beautiful defensive piece, and the knight on a4, when you think about force count, the force count white's going to need to mate us, is just not in the game over there. Now, is it still a spicy position? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay, let's continue. So black plays very simple and strong here. And here we can say we really like this position for black. If white's going to play this way, he needs to think about being a little bit more, some other idea here. Maybe DE. Yeah, maybe DE. But actually, yeah, and maybe some other move here as well. Like maybe G5 for him. Because the way he goes, he develops black's queen, and then he does this. It's important to see that now this knight is actually a tourist. He looks cool on b6, but he's actually a tourist. And then the other thing we really got to say is, wait a second, Baus. Wait a second, Baus. Why'd you throw this check in? Why did we throw that check in? And you talk about bishop e4 and other fancy things, but we just play rook b8 and say, well, that was good. Play rook d8 probably too, as long as we just move the rook. And then the king is hung out to dry forever. Forever. So this makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, here we go. Pop, pop. And I definitely going to say, Kirk, you should have played queen g3 here. And then I'm going to say this position is strategically lost for white because his knight's out of play, the bishop on f1's bad, and of course the glaring problem, the king is poor. Now notice that when you did this, king e2, you tried to find variations to mate him with, I don't understand bishop g6, but you're looking at bishop e4 and stuff, which, you should look at. But honestly, you just look at this position, you could say, oh, knight on b6 is a chump, and either rook d8 or rook b8 is going to be great here. And a problem, this is actually a good example of it. When white plays for space the way he did, he needs to make one or more of your pieces poor to make all these fancy pawn moves make sense. If he doesn't, then your pieces are going to spring to life, and soon, I can promise, white is going to get mated. So, yeah, he's going to get mated. And it's not just for GMs, like anybody we can say, like, right, the problem with space is you have to keep holding it. And then if you let the guy out, like here, e5's coming. Everything's going to be coming soon. Big problem. And so one of the reasons I think space is hard to play with is precisely a position like this. Yeah, I think white's lost. Bishop on f1's toast. Everybody's unhappy. Okay, castles. Now, this is not as good as the previous position. Just because his coordination is better. Now here's an interesting moment. You played knight d7, and clearly, well, let's state the obvious. You're afraid of castling because of g5. Maybe you should be. But again, the force count isn't necessarily in his favor because the knight on b6 is out. So notice what happens. Knight d7 happens, and what you're doing is you're scratching at that knight on b6, suggesting that he's a terror to your soul. Is he? That guy's just a chump. And white says to himself, oh, I got to play knight a4. No, Baus, that knight's going nowhere. And now, let's just say, in this position, you have one bad piece. It's your knight on f6. So one reason to at least think about letting him play g5 is when he does play g5, he activates your knight, right? e5 is another frisky move you could play here. Probably, I like e5 best. In any case, knight d7, the guy needs to take. He needs to take. And he's not necessarily worse here anymore. Maybe a move like f4, for example, preventing e5. And maybe he's giving you a little bit of the business here. It's not over yet. Maybe f6, maybe bishop e4. You got several moves. Okay, so knight a4. Now I believe in your position. Let's read what you wrote. I did not think castling was a good idea and decided to connect the rooks and open the b file. Maybe. Okay, I see b file. It's funny, but it says be file. I'm thinking, well, I want to play e5 myself. So, my initial reaction here is that e5 is a good move. The reason I'd rather play e5 now is if I castle, then the guy should probably play f4 to stop me from playing e5. And the reason I honestly don't want to play rook b8 and b6 or b5 is I don't want to give the knight on a4 something to do. The hell with that guy. He's not going anywhere. He goes back to knight c3, he's still a chump. So a simple plan would be e5, castles, put the rook on e8, and yeah, we're crushing this fool. Yeah, we're doing great. So here we go. King e7. Now your king has got its own troubles. Good move. And then here, right, you're misguided. Now, from his perspective, maybe bishop d3. But here we go. Pop. Now, you're right, I did not see this check, and it's important to really see that, very important to see that what's happened here is that you have enabled his knight on a4. And even after queen d6, you're going to be, I think, significantly worse after knight c5. Right? Yeah. And let's imagine for a half a second that you didn't see this move. We would still worry about knight c5 because knight c4, knight a6. Right? A little complicated, but I don't know exactly what's happening. I don't think anybody knows what's happening. But the point is, let's go back a second. And this is a key thing to improve for anybody. Usually it happens, by the way, this kind of problem. I see it more as a, let's call it a tenacious problem in the 2100s and 2200s I've coached, is not to sense good pieces, bad pieces. In any case, that's what's happening here, is you're not sensing that the knight on a4 is a bad piece and that you need to not just work around that dude. And because now he turns into a hero. Now that chump is a hero. And you might have legitimate problems. And because what you're doing is you're becoming, you obviously got obsessed with the b file, right? And after queen d6, knight c5, our position's definitely poor. And then I assume we're lost. Yeah. Now, let me just stress, when you say nervousness leads to bad calculation, I want you to see that it's definitely queen d6 is more tenacious, but it's the fact that all of a sudden his knight's a monster. That's what's leading to your downfall. Yeah. Okay. Let me read a couple comments here, and we'll move on to the next one here. So. Question from Knows All. How is Kirk D at 1740 only graduating from 1200, 1300? Because the Lee Chess, if you're rated 18, if you're rated 3000 on Lee Chess, you're like a 1500. I don't understand the Lee Chess ratings. I love Lee Chess, but their ratings are completely inflated. So that's the reason. B-Pal, thank you for subscribing. Now we got a first-time chat. Love your YouTube. If I were to be 2100 on Bullet, Blitz, and Rapid, what do you think the translation would be to USCF? We have a great translator on our site. So if you go to the training, I'll put that into the chat. You can find right there on our front page the translation tool that we designed for precisely the fact that there's all kinds of different rating systems out there, right? That was one of the first things we had to do at the dojo, was to get a translating tool. Okay. We got Floppy Pawn. Nice. Floppy Pawn is here. I'm trying to get Floppy Pawn into the training program, but he's a boomer GM like me. And so he is afraid, just desperately afraid of anything that smells like discord or of its ilk, you know? And I get it. I understand. It's a terrifying thing. It's just an absolutely terrifying thing. Okay, my friends. Let's go to the next person here, which is Cut Loose. Cut Loose, I could not find any of Cut Loose's games. However, let's go stalk him on the scoreboard for a second and see what we find here. So here's our scoreboard. I know that doesn't look like a scoreboard. I have to switch it. And now let's go over here. Cut. I guess it's a Footloose song. No, it went away. Can we try that again, Bows? Cut. All right. Cut Loose. So actually it's interesting. So he might have done more than one graduation. You can see, at least we'll look at this one first. And he's playing, he gained initially 300, he gained 301 points on the Lichess. 33 points per box ticked. And only played a couple classical games. Did his mate in twos. There you go. There you go. Did not submit anything to the database, at least according to this. Did his puzzles. Did some Silman. And that did it for him. And that did it for him. Now, let me stress something. When you see somebody like that, who makes progress very quickly and jumps several bands, what you can say is, oh, this person was not even close to their plateau, and a little bit of study, boom, did it for him, right? So my expectation is that when Cut Loose goes to the next higher band, he's going to be at the 1400, 1500. There's no chumps over there at 1400, 1500. It's going to get a little tougher. They're going to be hanging less pieces than the people he was playing here. And then my hope is that Cut Loose will start annotating some of his games. We'll take a look. And at some point, it's going to get harder. That's all I know. All right, let's take a look then at Polsky. And Polsky was in the chat and hasn't submitted anything yet. But let's go see how he did it. Polsky Power. And, right, so he started in 1100, 1200, and going up to 1200, 1300. And hasn't submitted any games yet. But let's see what he did. So increase of 75 points, beautiful, 9 points per box, great, fantastic. And then we got some made in twos, some puzzles for sure. This Puzzle Storm. I haven't done the Puzzle Storm, by the way. If you know, like that was the thing. A lot of people wanted to have more puzzles, and they wanted the Lichess people wanted the Puzzle Storm. Why have I not doing it? Have not done it? I will do it at some point, but I can't stream it because Chess.com, they're letting us do Chessable now because they bought Chessable. But I still can't stream Puzzle Storm. And I like to talk smack when I'm suffering through some puzzles, so that's why I haven't done it yet. But it's cool that it's part of our program. And there it is. So Polsky's in the chat, and I suspect, like I said with Cut Loose, that he is going to find he's going to need to do some game analysis because it's going to get harder. It's just going to get a lot harder once we get to the next level. Where is the Discord video you have been playing on stream? You mean the David's rap? It's on the YouTube, my friend. Okay. All right, so let's take another look then at the next game from Kirk D. And he is also black here. And this, I think, is a longer game. Is he going to go A6? There it is. All right, here's the thing. All right. And he writes, this is the third most frequent Grandmaster move against the Chebanenko, but much rarer at my level. As a matter of fact, I never faced it on Lichess before. Coach advises that this creates a permanent weakness on g4, he means b4, which becomes a good place for bishop f8, but also knight b8, i.e. not a5, knight a6, knight b4. Okay, precisely. Good. And the other thing we'll say about this move a4 is that it's also sad because a4 really the only thing it does is it prevents b5, whereas a6 does a variety of nice things by controlling b5. So just as an example, one thing that white could do is transpose to, God, chess.com, take it easy, boss. Take it easy. One thing that white could do is transpose to a exchange Slav. Oh, you're killing me. Okay. All right, Chess.com. Let's just relax a little bit, okay? Let's just relax, bows. So, all right, we're going to try it again. All right. You can transpose to this thing. And in this position, a6 is useful because there's a variety of times I might want to play b5. I just want to keep other pieces out of b5, right? So it's a useful thing to have. Whereas a4, it just does one thing. Just does one thing. Okay. And basically, right, it has to, maybe it's playable. It's kind of sad, right? Okay, here we go. e6. One thing that's interesting to me about this Kirk character is, you know, he's pretty, according to our trading system, he's not allowed to study openings as deep as he is. So the question will become in the analysis is this opening knowledge hurting or helping him? My gut is that it's hurting him, right? For example, instead of talking about ideas, he's talking about third most frequent move. He's talking about some bishop f5 is less recommended. Bishop f5 would be the question, like, well, why? Because if we can play bishop f5, we certainly would like to, right? And I think if there's a problem with bishop f5, it's going to be some kind of queen b3, but it's not immediately obvious how that's going to hurt you. There's nothing wrong with e6, though. Okay. I remembered that when playing e6, c5, excuse me, I remember that when playing e6, c5 needs to be played early. And I thought this was a logical preparation move. Coach agrees it is perfectly fine and stays in the Slav structure. Now, knight d7 in itself is fine. I'm not sure yet we want to play for c5. Definitely if I was black here, bishop d6 would be my next move. And he's saying actually one plays c5 right away. Now, see, that's an example where, like, one plays c5. No, the computer. The computer told somebody to play c5 right away. And I don't know if it's helpful for you to play c5 here. Because what you're doing is you're transposing now to a Tarrasch system, where you're claiming that because a4 is so weird, you can get away with losing a tempo like this, right? But it's not your structure, and it's not, and you're not developing, right? So I think that's the first example, I think, concretely, where the opening knowledge is not helping. Knight d7, fine. Now, bishop b4 also is fine. I like bishop d6, though. I think that's fine. Okay. And here he goes. This is always an interesting question about how to play this position. And you do, let's call it the natural reaction, by taking on e4 and then playing knight f6. And you mention dc bishop c4 and then e5, right? Actually, excuse me, I'm the one who put in e5. I think I did anyway. And this is just an interesting position, which happens quite a bit, honestly, without the inclusion of these moves. And I'd like to think that that inclusion helps you more than it helps your opponent. So just to be clear, what am I saying? You can imagine that instead of a6, you can imagine the following position. Let's say here, 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 here. You can imagine that this has been played hundreds of times, which it has. And we're just getting a4, a6 thrown in. Okay. Now, let's look at what you did. So here's our position. And you call this the natural way. Let's read what you write about knight f6. This looks good because it puts the knight on an active square and gains a tempo on the light square bishop. But I believe it was against the position. Black needs to free up his light square bishop, and e5 is the easiest way to achieve this objective. The knight supports this move, so why not do it right away? Coach advises that this move is okay. Okay, good. Now, one of the things I'll stress about this is, as white, I've actually had the position without a4, a6 thrown in a lot of simul games. I've done a lot of simuls, and I would say the players around below 1800 love to play knight f6 here. It feels like a tempo, right? And the real issue, right, is that you need to achieve this break, and also that the square e5 is great for white when you play knight f6. So yeah, I think it's a good Slav mistake to understand. Now, it's not the end of the world. In fact, your game, I think, is still completely playable. But it is going to give the possibility for white to play for some kind of advantage. Okay, so here we go. You mentioned e5. Great. I think e5 is a fine move. White is arguably a little bit better after e5. I like that you do castles. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Knight f6. Bishop d3 is a little controversial. Why not play bishop c2? Right? Why not play bishop c2? You could consider bishop g5 as well. Now let's talk basics. Black has a problem. It is the bishop on c8. If he can fix the problem, then he is fine. If he cannot fix the problem, then he is not fine. Yeah, so there it is. And so bishop g5 is usually controversial because of h6, which would force us to take, but it's cool that the bishop gets to stay on e4. Maybe a problem with bishop g5, though, is that both bishop b4 and queen a5 are a nuisance. So in any case, if it's clear, it feels clear to me that bishop c2 is more accurate than bishop d3. Not only because we might want to do some fancy pants stuff with queen d3, but also because the queen wants to stay in contact with the d pawn and the d file, especially because black should now be thinking about some kind of way to achieve either e5 or b6, c5. All right, let's see what happens. So we're going to go back to d3. I need a Peaky Blinders cap, apparently. Here we go. Castles, can't be wrong. Can't be wrong. And now we're going to test black's knowledge. I haven't seen yet. We're going to see, does he do something to urgently address the c8 bishop? Not really, no. So let's say what he says. Rook e8 was unrealistic, so I might have lost time here. You definitely lost time. And he says c5 may be the last opportunity. Yeah. Okay, good. So we talk a lot here about the dojo, about loss of tempo, and this is certainly it, because it's almost like, yeah, you're trying to achieve e5 in a position where it's no longer a thing. One good piece of news for you is that because the bishop is on d3 instead of c2, c5 makes a little bit more sense. And by the way, there's two moves that you could play here. I think both b6 and c5 are questions, right? Those are the big questions. b6 is in some ways more cautious, because with c5, he might be able to, he has maybe ways of pursuing things. Well, let's just compare and contrast with the bishop c2 for a second. So let's say castles, c5. Yeah, I like this a lot better for him. So now bishop g5 is a thought, and bishop e3 is a thought, and yeah, but I think bishop g5 is the first one to definitely consider. And if cd, then we'll want to consider queen d3 with a question, right? With a question. So bishop d3 looks like the mistake. And after c5, maybe white's still better just because you haven't fixed your bishop yet. But you could, a way to approach the position for both sides is to say white has a little bit of time, just a fraction of time before, in order to make this something, give black some kind of unpleasantness with this move, right? In fact, let's say it'd probably be better to do it now before castling, because in some variations we can imagine our queen giving a check over here. Yeah, makes a lot of sense actually, right? Here, now it's a little bit of a hassle, right? And in this position, it's really nice that this b4 square is loose. And for those purposes, actually, if bishop c2, probably c5 here as well. Correct. You can see now maybe we'll contrast it to this position. And black has thoughts. Black has thoughts here. Maybe queen c7, for example. Okay, good. So let's look at the game. Rook e8, mistake. Again, I want to say I have a visceral memory of many, many simul games where players did this as black, where they played knight f6, lost control of the e5 square, and then suffered. Reasonable looking, right? Now, another thing he could think about would be, how can I truly make this dude's life unpleasant? And one thing that he could have done would have been to play c5 himself, okay? And I think that would be clever, because it would prevent you from playing c5 and give your bishop a question. If you go this way, I'm going to presume that this pin is uncomfortable. If you go this way, then this bishop is probably going to come to f4, and you've definitely completely lost the battle for the e5 square, right? So rook e1, bishop e3. Frisky. Let's read what you wrote. A blunder after a lot of calculation because I was blind for this bishop h7 thing. Correct. Now, I want to stress, this came up a little bit in game number 1 too. What you're calling calculation, it's true, there's some calculation involved, but more importantly, what should have held you back from knight g4 was a sensibility that said, oh, bows. It said, oh, bows. I have to fix my bishop, right? So here you mentioned cd, bishop d4. The first question I'd like to ask would be b6, right? That's the first question I definitely want to ask. Why? I want to fix my bishop. I got to fix that dog. That dog's got to get fixed. Yeah, that guy's got to get fixed. So there might be a further variation. Maybe white could try to get frisky with a move like that. Maybe. But it's still wildly complicated here. Okay, so knight g4. Bam, good move. And now you are in deep. And it's important to see that you have not only lost the pawn, but from the attacker's perspective, it's cool that he is going to have the preponderance of force because your bishop on c8 is still not in the game. Let me be cruel for a second. I'm always cruel. But the point I want to make is, if you look at these videos I made, till I think I call them like Path to 2000, Path to 2100, what you'll see in those videos is they're often for them as well, even though they're at a higher level. They're making the same mistake where they'll be calculating a bunch of stuff, thinking about this or that, and then fundamentally not thinking about their pieces, right? So in their mind, they're kind of doing the same thing as you. They're thinking about calculation instead of like, boss, I'm not going to be able to pull this off without the bishop on c8 being involved. Okay, here we go. King h8, maybe king f8 is a little bit more testing. He finally goes back to c2. Now, queen b6, I definitely do not like. And what that move feels to me like is that you are desperate to like grab a pawn or something. But you should think of it as a force count issue where your king is about to get mated and the queen is helpful on d8, very helpful for controlling the squares. So you think about it from White's point of view, he's happy you won the pawn. Of course he's confident. He's hopeful. He's hopeful that he's going to be mating you. But honestly, he has a little bit of a struggle still before it's all over. So the moves to consider here for us would be b6, queen f6, and the weird g6. The point of g6 would be just to say, Baus, I want to play king g7, you know? You might have to end up playing g6 anyway. So queen b6, again, you are leaving the scene. Has to be winning. Has to be winning. Has to be, that has to be winning. Queen h8 made more sense to me, but I guess this is all the way gone. Yep, that's all the way gone. Life is hard, right? Okay. You know it's a Lee chess study when it says normal. Black resigns. Lee chess, why does it always say normal at the end? Huh? I don't understand. A boomer GM like me can't understand. Let's read what he writes. Not a good game. I played the opening suboptimally as I locked in my light square bishop and then did not open up the position decisively enough. In the middle game, I was blind for the classical Greek gift. Maybe it is good that I fell for it because I'm now more sensitive to it now. Good. A couple things I want to say in concluding is that no one's going to listen to me on this. I already know it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Maybe somebody will listen. At this level, he's doing too much openings, and it's getting in the way of actually understanding what to do because he's trying to like understand things at a level where it's not necessary because his opponents are going to be doing other weird things, and it's confusing. Whereas if he just focused on the principles, he would be going up. And then if you trust the program, right, it's not like, let's say, right, he's going up to 1200, 1300. At 1200, 1300, I believe, that's when we say, now you can do your opening against 1e4, i.e., up to this point, you should be doing just opening principles. And then after this, then, right, take a moment and learn a system against 1e4, right? Doesn't have to be super in-depth, just enough do you feel confident with it. And I know no one's listening because I know a lot of people already. I'm looking at their games. They're the 800, 900 level and stuff, and they're going deep in theory. And the point I just want to make is, one thing, the Dojo training program is growing great, right? But one thing, a pillar of the program is that what we're saying with the training program is not necessarily that we have the greatest training program ever. You can always debate who has the greatest training program out there. That's debatable, right? You can always put that to debate. But what we're saying is it's a good, solid program, and you will do yourself a favor if you don't second guess it. Because when you start second guessing it, what's going to happen is you're going to this resource, that resource, and it's going to end up confusing you because you're going to be wondering. You're going to be like, well, should I do this? Should I do that? Whereas if you just be like, okay, here's my requirements. This is what I got to do, right? Then it's going to happen. Now, I will say, Kirk, you're doing great with the annotations, man. Fantastic. Fantastic. Like, in fact, all of the annotations I'm looking at, I really, really like it. So again, the 3 pillars of the dojo training program, that there's a structure and accountability that you can cede authority to. Number 2, that there's a plus minus equal, right? So in the same way that I am going over Kirk's game, it would be very helpful to Kirk if he would review some games from an 800, right? And then be able to put in his own words, say for example, opening stuff to that 800. Just the principles of the opening, to explain it in his own words, what he sees the 800 doing wrong on the opening level, right? Wouldn't be theory, right? It would just be like, bows. You need to develop your guys. Just like here, I'm like, bows, that bishop on c8, it needed to come out. One of my favorite metaphors is the idea that at the beginning of the game, you are basically like a coach. Whether it's a soccer coach, a football coach, your coach, and your players are on the bench. And if you do not put them into the scrum, into the fight, they are just on the bench. They are not working. And that's really what Bishop C8 was doing all the time. In hockey, they have that box they got to sit out in, right? And the people who aren't developing their stuff, they're just playing down a dude. He's in the box. He's in the box, man. And so one of the cool things actually to see about this is just to become sensitive to those problems, to feel the urgency of those pieces. And one of the things from experience I can say is that until people get burned by stronger players punishing those bad pieces, usually they don't feel the urgency because their opponents often let them out. Well, let's give an example from this game. So earlier we had this really interesting position here where white could have played c5 and permanently made the life of the bishop on c8 hard, because what does black need? He needs to play c5 and he needs to play b6, right? That would be the true punishment of this move, rook e8. Okay, I'm going to end it there. We are coming back at 3 o'clock Eastern, 1 hour from now, to do Dojo Talks. And I'll tell you guys what, actually. I'll tell you what the theme of the talks is. We're taking on a controversial subject. And maybe I'll try to voice maybe even my initial thoughts. And they're not worked out yet. I'm actually going to leave here and then think about it a little bit more. So there is a woman arbiter named Shorey Bayat, and she had on one occasion a blue and yellow outfit on, Ukraine reference, and then also a reference to the women's movement in Iran during her time as being an arbiter. She was asked to change it during the Fisher Random Chess Championship. And again was told, no bueno. So that's what we're going to discuss. I have my own, it's an interesting discussion. It's obviously a kind of discussion that comes up in a variety of other sports, and I have my ideas on those different sports. And what I'm going to actually reflect on in the next hour is, like, in what ways is this chess specific, right? Because you can imagine it happens everywhere. And it's an evolving, I think it's especially an evolving situation because everybody has now, not necessarily a megaphone, but they have a phone. So they might have a microphone in terms of having a Twitter or other social media where they can put their views out there. Okay. So, my friends, that's it. I would love to play some Blitz, but Renga, he doesn't care anymore. Renga doesn't care anymore whether I go into the endgame, he's done. So there's nothing at stake anymore because Renga doesn't care. And I have to think about this. So we will be back soon. I'll raid somebody now. Let's raid somebody. Let's raid so many people. Let's raid friend of the dojo, Jesse Feb. How about that?